Thanks for holding, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's webinar about IEEE 1547-2018, which is the new national interconnection standard for distributed energy resources like solar PV systems and PV plus storage. And of course, the focus is not just going to be about general education, but specifically what do you need to know about Enphase systems and Enphase products to make sure that you're supplying your installers with the right equipment. This webinar is intended for distributors. Hopefully all of you on the call today are in that category. But we're also going to be holding another webinar for installers this Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which is going to cover much of the same information, but we're going to address some topics that specifically apply to installers during that webinar. My name's Tony Vernetti, and I've been with Enphase for about 2.5 years. I'm a sales and product trainer. I create a lot of content for Enphase University for mostly sales training type of content, and I also do a lot of training sessions for installer salespeople and sometimes distributors like yourself to keep you informed of updates to our products and things like that. So it's a pleasure for me to be here today to provide some hopefully valuable training to you. If you have a question during this session regarding really any topic that we're discussing, please use the questions tool of GoToWebinar. Just go ahead and type your question in there and hit enter. It's great for me to see those questions pop up during the session. That way I can address them during the Q&A at the end, or sometimes I'll just pause and answer the question if I know the answer in that moment. And if we don't know the answers, myself, with the help of my team, we'll make sure that we get the answers and get back to you by email within a day or so. So first, let's just lay out the learning objectives for this session. These are the takeaways I want you to come away with after the session. So after the session, you should be able to name the two main areas of focus of IEEE 1547-2018, explain where and when IEEE 1547-2018 will first be adopted, explain how adoption of the standard will impact existing and future solar and battery systems. And I want you to be able to identify compliant Enphase products easily by looking at their SKU number or packaging. So first, let's talk about what this really stands for. What is this new standard? IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. IEEE 1547 is the national interconnection standard used when connecting distributed energy resources, or what we abbreviate as DERs, like solar panels, inverters, and batteries to the utility grid. IEEE 1547-2018 is the second revision, and it contains the underlying requirements for interconnection. It relies on other companion standards for testing and certification, such as UL 1741. We are proud to announce that the Enphase IQ8 microinverter system is the first home energy system in the world that's built to this rigorous new standard. These necessary improvements to how distributed energy resources, or DERs, communicate with utilities are critical and enable our products to adapt more efficiently and cost effectively to the ever-evolving conditions of the utility grid. How can you and your customers make sure that you're prepared for IEEE 1547-2018? First, you should know that while the standard was published in 2018, it actually has not yet been adopted anywhere in the United States. But that's about to change, as we know that beginning on January 1st, several US states will adopt this standard. And in those states, installers must use only compliant products from Enphase. And I'm going to go into great detail about exactly which products are compliant. We recommend that installers use the most recent up-to-date data sheets in their building plan sets, which will indicate that the products are compliant with this new standard. We don't have the data sheets available today, but we are going to have them able to share by Friday, hopefully, if not very soon after. The first states which we know will adopt this new standard on January 1st, 2023 are New York, Pennsylvania, specifically the PPL utility, and the New England states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. They will be followed shortly by Hawaii on February 1st, and then California on April 1st. And we expect additional states to follow suit later in 2023. We expect the adoption date of the utility to be enforced based on the interconnection application date. In other words, if the interconnection application date is later than the adoption date, then the system and its parts must comply with the new standard. And if the interconnection application date is before the adoption date, then you may be able to use hardware that's not compliant. To be safe, we recommend checking with the utility. Which Enphase products and systems are impacted? For new installations, all Enphase products are impacted by these new standards on the date of adoption in each state. For existing systems, fortunately, the requirements are not retroactive, so sites that are already installed don't need to be updated with either software or hardware. A couple important notes here. Three-phase implementations using IQ7. So when IQ7s are used for three-phase systems on commercial buildings, they're coupled with a device called an NPR. This combination is not going to be IEEE 1547-2018 compliant. So if you have plans to install this type of system in your region, make sure you're very clear on when this is going to be adopted so that you don't install a system that is not compliant. The second bullet point here is that the Envoy S metered can't be used, also known as the Gateway S metered. Can't be used. It's not going to be compliant with 1547-2018. This is an older version of the IQ Gateway that is used with older models of microinverters like M215s and M250s. Obviously, you're not going to be installing new systems with old microinverters, but sometimes the Envoy S metered is used to replace an older Envoy if batteries are going to be added to a site that has M215s or M250s. So this really applies to retrofit systems, systems that are being retrofitted with IQ batteries. Let's review which SKUs of Enphase products are compliant. All IQ7 and IQ8 microinverter series SKUs are compliant with the new standard, as are all IQ batteries and IQ system controllers for backup storage systems. For IQ combiners and IQ gateways, there are newly redesigned versions that are compliant. Even though the product names are the same, you must use the correct SKUs to be compliant with the new standard. Please note that only the IQ Combiner 4 and 4C will have compliant versions. The IQ Combiner 3 will not be compliant. If you have a customer that plans on using IQ7 microinverters and the IQ system needs to be compliant, make sure that you sell them the IQ Combiner 4 SKU that's compliant and don't accidentally give them an IQ Combiner 3. Please also note that only the IQ Gateway will have a new compliant version. As I mentioned, the Gateway S metered, the older model compatible with M series and S series, is not going to have a version that's compatible or compliant. For those of you who might not be too familiar with the different components, with the IQ Combiner 4, this is a combiner box for the PV system's branch circuits, and it also houses the IQ Gateway. That printed circuit board on the back wall of the box is the same board that's inside the standalone IQ Gateway on the right. PV systems that exceed the capacity of an IQ Combiner will typically be the ones that are using the standalone IQ Gateway, as well as an off-the-shelf load center as the combiner for the PV branch circuits. So in other words, a system is going to have one of these devices, not both. Now let's take a closer look at the SKU number so you can easily identify the right number for a compliant product. The new compliant IQ Combiner 4 SKU begins with X2. The non-compliant SKU begins with X. If you don't see a 2 after the X, it isn't the new compliant model. The same is true for the IQ Combiner 4C. The Combiner 4C is simply the Combiner 4 with an included cell modem. The new compliant IQ Gateway SKU begins with ENV2, whereas the non-compliant SKU begins only with ENV. Similarly, if there isn't a 2 after the ENV, then it's not the compliant version. To help you easily identify the new compliant products, there's also going to be a label on the cardboard boxes of the IQ Combiner 4s and IQ Gateways. There's also going to be a label on the larger box of 12 IQ gateways. So you should be able to just simply look for the label that says IEEE 1547 2018 compliant on the cardboard boxes. Now say you have an IQ combiner, but you don't have the box or the package anymore, or an installer calls you for support, and you want to figure out if it's compliant or not. Well, you just have to look at the SKU number, which is fortunately on the label on the inside door of the IQ combiner, 404C. It's blown up here. It's on the left-hand side of that label, right under the name Enphase. And similarly, if you have an IQ gateway without the box, you can look for the SKU number on the label on the back. It's going to be right under the name Enphase again. You've got the SKU numbers we mentioned on the previous slide, and it'll also say IEEE 1547 2018 compliant. So let's talk a little bit about some of the technical details so you understand the reason for the new models. So what is it with the new standard that requires some new hardware and firmware? The key difference has to do with interoperability requirements that didn't exist previously. Interoperability is defined as the capability of two or more networks, systems, devices, applications, or components to externally exchange and readily use information securely and effectively. There are two key areas of the interoperability requirements that we need to address. Those are hardware and communication protocol. Let's talk about hardware requirements first. First, the first requirement is that a local distributed energy resource, or DER, communications interface has to be located at the installation site. Now with our systems, the IQ gateway is this local DER interface. That could be the standalone gateway or the gateway that's built into the IQ combiner. This DER interface must remain available when the DER is operating. Now the challenge is, or the problem is that the old SKUs that are not compliant, they would restart during an event called a low voltage ride-through event. This is a kind of event that happens if there's a brownout. The utility grid is under a lot of stress, under high demand. The voltage is going to drop, and they want us to make sure that our hardware is going to stay on. Again, the old version won't stay on. The new remodeled or revised version of the IQ gateway has larger capacitors, and that allows it to basically stay on when there's a low voltage ride-through event. A little graphic here to illustrate that point. During that low voltage ride-through event, if the IQ gateway stays on because it's a new compliant model, that's a compliant system. And if that IQ gateway does restart, that would be a non-compliant system. A compliant system must support one of three communication protocols. The specific protocol that's used at a given site is going to be specified by the utility. The three protocols are IEEE 2030.5, which is supported by Enphase. This has been selected as the interoperability protocol in California and Hawaii, and it appears to be emerging as the de facto national standard interoperability protocol. The next is Sunspec Modbus. Support for this protocol is under development at Enphase. This is a legacy protocol that's commonly used in older equipment and some energy management systems, but to our knowledge, it's not being specified by utilities yet, but it's possible that it could be. The third is DNP3. Support for this protocol is not being planned by Enphase, and I'll explain why. DNP3 is a legacy protocol commonly used by utilities in large power plants and substation automation. Because it's used in large power plants, it may be required in very large multi-megawatt systems, but we're unaware of any utility which requires DNP3, and we don't foresee needing to be compatible or compliant with that. Now the last page here is simply just a few FAQs that I expect you guys would have, so I'm going to try to nip those in the bud and see if we can, clarify what we expect you to ask. So the first is, you're probably wondering what's happening to our current orders. Well, Enphase is aware, again, of the regions that are going to be impacted first and which distributors we need to get compliant product to initially. So your Enphase distribution account manager is going to be reaching out to you guys if you're in regions that are impacted first, so namely New York, New England, and PPL in Pennsylvania, followed by Hawaii and then California in a few months. So they're going to be reaching out to you, of course, to make sure that that orders are updated with the compliant SKU, so that, of course, you're able to supply your customers with the right products. Second question, is the IQ7 series compliant with the new standard? So I kind of breezed over this earlier. So yes, the IQ7 series can be installed. However, it must be used, or it must be installed with the IQ Combiner 4 or 4C, because the combiner has to be compliant too, not just the microinverter. It's common for IQ7s to be sold with IQ Combiner 3s because it has to do with not needing the Combiner 4 unless you're doing storage. However, again, just to be clear, in order for it to be a compliant system, the IQ Combiner 4 needs to be installed with the IQ7. Question, does the non-compliant IQ Combiner 4 become obsolete? So no, only in regions that have adopted the new standard will the old combiner be unusable. It can still be used in other regions where the standard has not yet been adopted. Next FAQ, when will the compliant Combiner 4 and 4C and IQ Gateway SKUs be available in quantity? So we're actually going to have product in our distribution centers by the end of the week, and that's going to be start to ship out in limited quantities to distributors that require these compliant components first. In the first half of 2023, the majority of IQ Combiner 4 and 4Cs that Enphase manufactures, and IQ Gateways for that matter, are going to be compliant. And by the second half, over 95% will be compliant. And lastly, you might be wondering if installers are also going to be trained on this topic. So yes, installers will be informed and trained on IEEE 1547-2018 compliance. They're going to get an email within the next day or two, and we're also going to hold a webinar for installers on Friday and share the recording far and wide, so everybody, especially in those early impacted regions, has a chance to get educated. We also have a page on our website at this URL right here that's dedicated to this topic of IEEE compliance. So we encourage you and installers that would like all the details to check out the website. All right, let's see if we accomplished our learning goals here. So knowledge check. Feel free to answer the questions in the answer these in the questions interface or just follow along. First, where and when will IEEE 1547-2018 first be adopted? The answer is New York and New England on January 1st, 23, as well as PPL in Pennsylvania, forgot to mention that, followed by Hawaii on 2/1 and California on 4/1. True or false, existing solar PV systems must be upgraded with compliant hardware when this new standard is adopted. False. The new standard only applies to new systems. Existing systems won't need to be modified to be made compliant. What are the two main areas of interoperability compliance? Those would be hardware requirements and communications protocol requirements. True or false? IQ combiners and IQ gateways can be made compliant with the new standard with a firmware upgrade. False. The IQ combiner and IQ gateway hardware must be compliant. That's why it's important to check the SKUs. Name two ways to identify a compliant IQ gateway or IQ combiner. There will be labels on the box, as I mentioned, individual boxes, as well as a box of 12 IQ gateways. And if the packaging is missing, the SKU is going to be visible on both the combiner and the IQ gateway. All right, well, that is actually all the content we're going to cover today, so I'd love to open it up to a Q&A. So not seeing any questions come in, Anthony. We did review the content of the webinar yesterday. Now that you've actually seen the presentation, was there anything that you think we should clarify or add that perhaps I accidentally left out?
No, I think you did a great job on this. One thing just to let everybody know is they can definitely reach out to the distribution account managers that they work with to understand the supply and when it will be arriving to your locations. That is something we are currently working on, especially for the early adoption states like Northeast, New England, New York, and parts of Pennsylvania. But if you do have questions, please reach out to your distribution account managers and we can help.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Okay, a question came in from Damien. This is fairly short notice for us in New England. Do you know if there will be a grace period allowed by the utilities and grid operators? It's a good question, Damien. I haven't heard anything about something like a grace period. It's not that easy to get clear answers from utilities on exactly when and how this is going to be enforced and what documentation or proof they'll be looking for. So it is going to be kind of a wait and see situation. But fortunately, as I mentioned, the date that determines whether or not a system needs to be compliant is the interconnection application date. So that should give out installers an opportunity to get those applications in before January 1st, and then that will give them some time to say that they're not going to install a system until February or March. That'll give them time to get the compliant hardware, from their distributors for those systems. All right, well, we'll go ahead and conclude today's session. If you do have additional questions, as Anthony said, you can reach out to your distribution account manager. You can also reply to the email that you got when you signed up for this webinar. If you want to send me a question, I hopefully can answer it for you, or I can get the answer from one of the distribution account managers. Thanks for joining us for this session today. Hopefully it was valuable for you. Have a great day.